The Shuttle Discovery, poised at Cape Canaveral for a launch tomorrow morning. It may be the most ambitious and eagerly awaited mission in the history of the shuttle program. On board a giant telescope that will redefine our view of the universe. Good evening, I'm Chris Wallace, and this is Nightline. The Hubble telescope will give us the most dramatic new view of the heavens since Galileo first peered through a telescope in 1609. All of it seen 10 times more clearly than ever before. To carry the telescope into orbit, the Discovery crew will go higher than any shuttle crew has gone before, 380 miles above the surface of the Earth. We'll focus on man's new eye on the universe tonight.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington, Chris Wallace.
The launch of the Hubble telescope is the kind of event that gives superlatives a bad name. Scientists and space reporters straining, sometimes straining hard, to capture the drama of the moment. They talk of the world's most extraordinary looking glass, the most optically precise mirror ever built, an instrument that will bring 5 to 10 trillion objects into focus. And then there's this one. With this telescope, theoretically, you could read heads or tails on a dime 100 miles away. But for all the flourishes of rhetoric and detail, the Hubble telescope will provide the best answers yet to some of our oldest questions. Questions man has been asking since he began looking up at the stars. How did the universe begin? Are we alone, or are there other planets circling other stars? And how will the cosmos end? It is an extraordinary time to be looking at the stars. For the people behind the Hubble telescope, these are the last nervous moments before they see a sky they've never seen before.
The Hubble Space Telescope is an astronomical telescope that is built to observe the universe. We will be looking at stars, planets, galaxies, the works.
This represents the largest single increase in astronomers' capability to study the stars and galaxies since Galileo started using a telescope. When Galileo used a telescope instead of his eye, he saw the universe 10 times sharper than ever before seen. A good analogy is if you had 2200 vision, like I do in this eye, everything's fuzzy. When I put my glasses on, that's a factor of 10. It gets me down to 20/20, and suddenly I can see. And that's what this means for astronomers and for the people. We're going to be putting our glasses on for the first time and hopefully seeing the writing on the wall.
Whether people realize it or not, there's a lot of dust and moisture in the upper atmosphere. So when you can get up above that with a telescope, as we're doing now, you get much sharper images and you're able to see further.
The Hubble Space Telescope will be above the Earth's atmosphere, and so it won't be subjected to all the blurring that the Earth's atmosphere poses on a picture, so the pictures will be much crisper.
The Hubble Space Telescope, in essence, is a time machine. And the reason for that is simple. Light doesn't travel at an infinite velocity. That is, it doesn't go from point X to point Y in zero time. It takes time. For instance, when you see the moon at night, you're not seeing the moon as it is now, you're seeing it as it was 2 seconds ago. Because it takes light 2 seconds to go from the moon 250,000 miles to the Earth.
The light from the sun, really, that you're seeing right at this instant, started some 8 minutes ago. It's the same thing with stars that are further out.
So let's say we look at a galaxy at 10 billion light years. All right? It took the light 10 billion years for the light to get from there to here. So what you're seeing is not how the galaxy looks today. You're seeing how it looked 10 billion years ago. And therefore, as it was when it was very, very, very young. It was a lot harder to build than we thought. This thing has tremendous specifications on it. It's the highest technology you can get. It's equivalent to launching a 4.5-story building into space that weighs 25,000 pounds. And you can't take really good pictures unless you keep this thing steady, very steady. So even though it's a 4.5-story building, 25,000 pounds, we have to point it to 7/1000ths of an arc second, which of course doesn't mean anything to anybody, even an astronomer, how incredibly small that angle is. But if you had a laser, okay, and you had it in Washington, you pointed that laser with the accuracy that this thing points. You could shoot that laser all the way to New York, 200 miles away, and hit a dime on the World Trade Center. Not just hit that dime, but keep it within the dime's diameter for up to 24 hours a day.
The fact that Hubble is the payload, and it's an expensive payload, and it's the one that a lot of the nation who follows space and science, that's the payload, adds some more excitement to it, more interest.
It was always like a myth. It was 2-3 years away. Was it really going to happen? You never really knew. So when I was driving into the Cape on Thursday, I came down about 5 days early, I saw the shuttle on the pad, and I knew what was in it, this thing. And it just hit me. I mean, I was driving down the road, and my hands started to shake, and I almost felt like I had to go off on the shoulder, because I was really almost breaking up. That's how much the emotion was for me.
You know, on one hand, as I say, I'm kind of sorry to see it go. Me and the telescope have suffered a lot together. But on the other hand, it's meant to fly. You know, we'll be pleased to see it go. The rest of the community, I think, feels kind of the same way.
One of the engineers with our team was going over to the Goddard Control Center, and I said, "Oh, John, are you doing a pad rehearsal test?" And he said, "Sally, this isn't a rehearsal. It's on the pad." I understand it intellectually, but it's just dawning on me now emotionally that this baby's going to fly.
In that last few seconds before liftoff, I think I'm going to have, again, very mixed emotions. I'm going to fear for the telescope. I'm going to fear for the flight crew. You know, they've got to be personal friends, too. But on the other hand, it's kind of like, you know, this thing has finally made it. It's its day. You know, it's ready to go do its thing. And I'll be proud of it.
I'm going to be shaken. I'll be exhilarated when the thing disappears into space. I'll really go crazy, probably, with the rest of all the astronomers here. We'll probably be yelling and screaming.
When those first data come down, that will be a tremendous relief. That's what we've been working for all of these years. And it won't be just data. This will tell us something about the universe.
But, you know, you kind of liken it to, you're walking down a stream bed and you want to lift up a rock. Now, you don't know what's under that rock till you lift it up. You may find a salamander or a crawfish, or maybe nothing. Maybe it's something exotic you never even expected. That's what we're going to do out there in that place. You know, you're going to essentially be lifting up rocks and seeing what's under them. And, you know, it could just boggle your mind.
When you wish upon a star, your dreams come true.
When we come back, we'll go live to the Lick Observatory in Mount Hamilton in California, where astronomer Joseph Miller will show us why the Hubble telescope has scientists so excited. And we'll also talk with the NASA official in charge of the Hubble project, Dr. Charles Pellerin.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by Mazda.
Mazda isn't shouting about its spring sales event. Not with values like this 626. With more room and a better basic warranty than Honda Accord, it's priced $966 less. And now get $1,000 cash back plus air or automatic at no extra charge. With up to $1,810 in value, we don't have to shout. But maybe we want to.
At your local Mazda dealers now.
The real test of a power mower is starting it easily on the first pull. That's why Sears is putting 100 Craftsman Eater 1 mowers on the line. Look at that. 99 first pull starts out of 100. No wonder there are more Craftsmen on the job than any other brand.
Face the facts. From personal to advanced full color, America's most popular copier is Canon.
When friends don't stop friends.
It's deer season, and your John Deere dealer has big savings on John Deere riding mowers and tractors. Save $125 on every John Deere riding mower. Save $100 on every STX lawn tractor. Save $175 on every 100 series lawn and garden tractor. And now, at participating dealers, get 90 days, same as cash, with your John Deere credit card. But hurry, deer season ends May 31st, and the last deer season riders and tractors will soon be gone. See your Middle Tennessee John Deere Network dealer today.
Oh, I just love this time of year. Everything is so pretty.
Oh, I do too. I love it. Everything's blooming. The jonquils, the dogwoods, and the
I have got the worst case of spring fever right now.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
Easter's going to be here before you know it.
Yeah.
Easter, what a great excuse to buy a new dress.
Mm-hmm.
I always got one when I was a kid.
I saw these great dresses by Sabino at Kastner Knott.
Really? What do they look like?
Oh, they're in beautiful colors and florals. They look like spring.
Oh, great.
Sabino. Dress it up for the 90s at Kastner Knott.
Homes to the poor.
Makes us feel good about ourselves like everybody else does.
Watch Peter Jennings on World News Tonight tomorrow.
Joseph Miller is a professor of astronomy at the University of California at Santa Cruz and assistant director of the Lick Observatory on Mount Hamilton in California, where he joins us tonight. Dr. Charles Pellerin is director of the Astrophysics Division at NASA and has been responsible for the Hubble telescope project for the past 8 years. He joins us tonight from Cape Canaveral. Dr. Pellerin, as I've read and watched the reports of the Hubble telescope the last few days, it's almost seemed like the Super Bowl, the build-up about this event. In fact, I even read one article about the dangers of the Hubble hype. You know, we're comparing this to Galileo back in the 17th century. Is it really comparable in terms of the extraordinary leap forward in our vision of the universe?
Well, Chris, it absolutely is, and I'll tell you why. The crucial factor about this telescope is its increase in angular resolution, or the ability to see more clearly. In the history of astronomy, everything was done with the human eye until 1610. Galileo turned the telescope to the heavens. We had a factor of 10 increase. Since that time, angular resolution has sort of trickled up slowly until now we're about to make the same leap as Galileo exactly, a factor of 10. It is a very fair comparison, I believe.
Dr. Miller, one of the big advantages, one of the reasons that we're once again going to jump forward by a factor of 10 is, of course, because this telescope will be up in space and able to look at the stars directly, not through the Earth's atmosphere. Can you show us what a big advantage that is?
Yeah, one of the great disadvantages of observing from the Earth is looking up through the Earth's atmosphere, which is sort of like looking up from the bottom of a swimming pool and trying to see what is situated above it. Tonight we have a particularly bad night at Lick Observatory where the air is very turbulent, and we've turned the telescope that's behind me, which is the 40-inch telescope of the Lick Observatory, on the planet Jupiter. And when you look at Jupiter through the telescope tonight, it looks like a fuzzy, oblong ball without much detail. In fact, if you look closely, you'll see a dark stripe running from top to bottom, and that's about all we can see tonight. This is what an astronomer would call a bad night, that is, a night of bad seeing. The air is very turbulent. The space telescope, though, will give us a view of Jupiter that's very comparable to those that were returned from the Voyager mission.
It's an extraordinary difference. We've just put the picture up on the screen. Give us a sense of what kinds of things you'll be able to see now from the Hubble telescope that you weren't able to see from your telescope there at the Lick Observatory.
Well, there's two major differences. One is the detail to which we'll be able to resolve distant objects. Distant galaxies, which now look like a blur, will be resolved into individual stars. We'll be able to identify particular kinds of stars that give clues to distance. Another thing we'll be able to do that we can't possibly do from the ground is look in the far ultraviolet. The Earth's atmosphere, the ozone layer, which has been in the news lately, blocks our view of the light that comes from a bluer color than the ultraviolet, the deep ultraviolet. The space telescope situated above this Earth's atmosphere will allow us to have a very clear view deep into the ultraviolet, that light that never makes it to the ground. And that will allow us to see a different universe from that which we can see from the ground.
Dr. Pellerin, we touched on this in our piece earlier, and it's very complicated. See if you can simplify it for us, because distance, since we know how fast light travels, if we know how far away a star is, we can also tell how old it is by knowing how long it would have taken to get there. Therefore, well, let me ask you, first of all, with the telescopes on Earth, what is the most distant, what is the oldest star that we can now see?
Well, I think the important thing to think about is the oldest galaxy, because that's very old. And recently, a galaxy's been observed with a redshift of 4. That corresponds to something about 10 billion years old. Hubble telescope will be able to probe that galaxy, perhaps see structure in it, And with Hubble telescopes' finer resolving power and increased sensitivity, we have the possibility to see things significantly older yet. Chris, you know, the problem today is we don't even know what's there. We don't know what's older. We've never seen farther back in time. We know these objects are very young, formed very early in the universe, and it's one of the great mysteries as to how galaxies form. The initial Big Bang was totally smooth and uniform, yet somehow in that early period, matter conglomerated itself into galaxies, stars, and planets, and that's what we're going to try and find out.
Doctor, we trust everything will go well tomorrow. We also trust there'll be a launch, and there is a weather problem. It's only about 60-40 at this point that the shuttle will even go up. What are your biggest worries? What keeps you up? What's going to keep you up tonight? What could go wrong with that piece of hardware behind you?
Well, Chris, I hate to tell you this, but I'm not really too worried. This is a very, very fine piece of machinery. It's been thoroughly tested. It has no liens against the hardware. It performs, according to our calculations, better than its requirements in almost every area. It's been trouble-free. We've got lots of runtime on it, and I'm very confident this telescope's going to work just fine.
If you're wrong, if something does go wrong, I assume the astronauts could either fix it, or what? Would they pack it up and bring it back in the space shuttle?
Well, we have a lot of options. First thing that might happen, let me tell you a little bit about what's going to take place in the next period. Our launch window opens at 8:47. We're hoping for some good weather, and we'll go. About 4 hours after we fly, we bring on our computers and get our first glimpse as to how our flight system is behaving. Then about 24 hours after launch, the arm picks the telescope up, takes it out into what we call the hover position, and the appendages come out. This model behind me, this 5th scale model, shows the Hubble, and one crucial area is these solar arrays have to deploy within about 4 or 5 hours. If these solar arrays don't come out, the astronauts are ready. Bruce and Kathy will come out. They have tools. They'll deploy these appendages. The same with these antennas, which are our communications antennas. Then finally, we release the aperture door. Once we release the door, the shuttle goes about 45 miles away, and we start using our telescope.
Well, Doctor, that telescope, of course, as you well know, was supposed to originally be put up into space 7 years ago, and along the line there has encountered a number of problems. When we come back in a moment, I'd like to talk to both you and Dr. Miller about that. And when we come back, we'll also be joined by a critic of the project, space writer and Newsweek contributing editor Greg Easterbrook, who says if it weren't for NASA's bumbling, the Hubble telescope would have been up years ago.
You could call one company to take your package to an address across town. And you could find somebody to take your package to any address cross-country. Then you could call a third outfit that could take your package overseas. And yet another that could take your package overnight. But there's only one company you could call if you only wanted to make one call.
You think you're better than me, don't you?
Oh, not again. I was better than you in high school. I was better than you in college. And I'm better than you now.
There are still some people in this world who can change tax brackets without changing personalities.
You want to put that to a test?
Let's go.
Now?
Now.
For those people, there's a car called the Legend Coupe from Acura. #1 in customer satisfaction 3 years in a row.
If you know all the hot topics, you got to know that stress management is one of the greatest these days. You'll find book after book and seminar after seminar on that topic. Well, here's one you ought to be sure to try. It's the oldest in the book, but it's always new, and it always works. The book is this one. It's the Bible. The seminar is here on Channel 2 every Sunday morning at 9:30, and you got it. It's a church service. Try it right here, right after Charles Kuralt this Sunday. I'm Jerry Sutton, pastor of Two Rivers Baptist Church.
Hello, I'm Glenda Gibbs, and I'd like to introduce one of the nation's leading wildlife artists, Ralph McDonald.
Thank you, Glenda. This is my latest print release, titled Old Harper's Shoes, and it features a gray squirrel.
Old Harper's Shoes? There's bound to be a story behind this. Ralph will be at Picture Frame Warehouse in Rivergate on Saturday, April 14th from 1 to 4. Come by and meet Ralph and learn the story behind this beautiful painting. Picture Frame Warehouse on Maya Drive in Rivergate.
I'd like you to try a new radio station. They call it Light FM, and it's really different. This station believes in music. They play light favorites, no hard rock, and no sleepy elevator music. They never talk over your favorite songs, and it'll always be that way. So, turn on the light. Light FM, 92.9. Try it. You'll love the difference.
3 students, 3 lives, all riding on the decisions of college administrators.
Grades alone mean nothing.
What does it really take to get into college? Watch Primetime Thursday.
Tomorrow, coverage of the launch of the Space Shuttle Discovery.
And how will advertisers aim the hard sell in the 90s? Plus, comedian Stephen Wright on Good Morning America tomorrow.
Greg Easterbrook frequently writes about space and science issues for Newsweek magazine, the Atlantic Monthly, and the New York Times. He has been critical of both the Hubble telescope project and of NASA management in general. Mr. Easterbrook, scientists are calling this the greatest leap forward in our view of the universe since 1609, so leave it to a reporter to find something to criticize. What's wrong with this project?
That's our job, Chris. I think you're right to say that excitement for this project is very high. There hasn't been such excitement since the launch of the Viking landers toward Mars in 1975. But if it weren't for NASA's excessive reliance on the space shuttle, launching missions like this that could easily be carried aloft by expendable rockets at very great cost and risk to precious human lives, we wouldn't have to wait 15 years between significant missions. We could be launching these missions much more frequently at much lower cost to the taxpayer.
Dr. Pellerin, why don't you respond to that? Is there any necessary reason why this project, this telescope, had to go up on a shuttle rather than an unmanned space rocket?
Well, Chris, I'll tell you the way I feel about this precious device. I wouldn't want to have this carried in any vehicle except a space shuttle. The space shuttle is the safest, most reliable launcher that exists. You may have noticed that an Ariane failed a few weeks ago, a Titan failed a few weeks ago, and this, I think, is the right payload for the kind of care the shuttle program takes before it launches. And secondly, I mentioned already, we have lots of insurance against failure with our crew ready to go and take care of all kinds of appendage deployment problems. We also use the space shuttle for a contingency repair mission. We have the capability to fly in less than 1 year's notice. If anything breaks on this telescope, almost everything can be fixed. And I don't think we'd want to have a device as sophisticated, as complex, and as difficult to develop as this one has been in space without a means to take care of it with the space shuttle. The space shuttle is an essential part of the concept of this program.
Mr. Easterbrook, what about that? It does seem to be a pretty big advantage, since this is going to be a 10 or 15-year mission, to have the capability to repair it.
Sure, that's always helpful. It's not an advantage, I don't think. First, to have the launch costs that are entailed in the space shuttle. Very roughly, to send the Hubble telescope up on the shuttle costs approximately twice as much as it would cost to send it up on a Titan IV expendable booster. And I don't see where it's an advantage to risk precious human lives in the delivery of a routine robot payload into space. Could very easily be done by an expendable rocket. There are some times, perhaps, when you need to risk human life for space. This isn't one of them.
Dr. Pellerin, let me ask you about one of the other disadvantages of having it on a shuttle rather than an unmanned rocket. Ideally, you would put this telescope much further up in the atmosphere, in the neighborhood of 22,000 miles. And instead, because it's on a shuttle, it's going to be about 380 miles above the Earth. Isn't that a big difference? Not at all, Chris. That's not the issue, I don't believe. There's no expendable launch vehicle that can take the telescope higher than the shuttle can, but that's not relevant, really. We know a lot about scientific payloads in geosynchronous orbit. My division operates one right now, IUE, so it's familiar to us how things work up there. There's a very fundamental problem. The primary detector system on this telescope is called the Wide Field Planetary Camera. It simply won't function at a very much higher altitude because of the radiation background. We've done calculations, and it would be enormous amounts of shielding. So this instrument, as it's conceived and with its most important instrument using charge-coupled devices, can't work up there. So we absolutely would be crazy to try and put this in geosynchronous orbit. The radiation's too high. Mr. Easterbrook, you have also said that you think that the telescope is pointed in the wrong direction, that it should be pointed at objects of more direct relevance to Earth. Explain that.
Well, that's a more general criticism of NASA's science programs. Everybody will emphasize again, everybody agrees that the Hubble telescope will produce a windfall of scientific knowledge. But if you look at the emphasis in NASA's science programs, it's all towards the outer planets and the far heavens, both fascinating scientifically, but both have absolutely no effect whatsoever on the Earth. If you look at the areas of the solar system that are of interest to the Earth, and that especially could have some effect on today's environmental issues, global warming, the ozone layer, and etc. It's Earth itself, the Sun, the source of all life, and Venus, the most Earth-like of planets in this solar system, which has a runaway greenhouse atmosphere. NASA, if it wanted to respond to the public's concerns, could be focusing its attention on our own Sun rather than distant stars, and on Venus, a planet much like us that suffers from global warming. These are very fertile fields for investigation, too, and have never been NASA priorities.
Dr. Miller, briefly, out at the observatory there, how do you respond to that? Is the telescope pointed in the wrong direction at the wrong objects?
There's lots of different kinds of science that interests the human race. As an astronomer, I'm particularly interested in astronomy. We must realize that the Hubble Space Telescope is an astronomical instrument, and therefore it's really focused on answering fundamental astronomical questions. I don't deny that these questions that might be answered by more studies of Venus, questions of more relevance to the Earth, aren't important, but this is an astronomical instrument, and as an astronomical instrument, it's properly designed to focus its attention on the most important and significant astronomical questions that we face today.
Dr. Miller, thank you. And on this eve of the launch of the Hubble telescope, we'll have some final thoughts from all of our guests when we continue our conversation in a moment.
Profiles in quality. Pride.
When you get pride, you get quality. That's what I said back in '81.
And today we still have that same pride.
And from what we hear, a lot of people think we're doing a pretty good job.
You can hear the quality.
You can see the quality.
You can feel the quality in the way it handles.
Thanks.
That's what happens at Ford, Mercury, and Lincoln when quality is job one.
If you're confused about which long-distance company has the lowest rates, remember one simple thing. Sprint Plus always costs less. No matter which AT&T Reach Out America plan you have, no matter when you call. And for a limited time, Sprint Plus comes with 30 free minutes of the best-sounding long distance. Just call 1-800-877-4000 now. We'll even switch you for free. Sprint Plus, it's all you need to know about saving on long distance.
Here at the firehouse, we always try to sit down and eat a good square meal. But to be honest, we just can't always do it. Sure, we know we still need to get stuff like vitamins, minerals, and nutrients. And we do, at breakfast, in Product 19.
No one food has everything you need, but every Product 19 breakfast has 19 vitamins, minerals, and other essential nutrients. So if you can't always count on eating right...
Lunch? Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
Count on 19. Product 19.
Here at Earl Dunn, our goal is to sell every Pontiac and GMC truck from $300 to $800 less than the competition for the same exact model. That's why people drive from all over Tennessee and southern Kentucky to buy from Earl Dunn. This new 1990 Pontiac Grand Am LE Coupe with automatic and air is just $94.86 at Earl Dunn. And this is one example. You get the best service, the largest selection, and the lowest price at Earl Dunn Pontiac GMC here in Madison. Unless the Earl Dunn emblem is on your car or truck, you probably paid too much.
Continuing our conversation now on the Hubble telescope, Dr. Miller, scientists are saying that the real achievement of this project is not going to be in answering today's questions, but in finding things out that we can't even imagine today. Could we find something as remarkable as Galileo found in 1609, something that would shock us as much as the idea that the Earth revolves around the sun?
Well, I think the one thing we can expect the most from the Space Telescope is the unexpected. When the 100-inch telescope went into operation in Southern California, when the 200-inch telescope went into operation, and when, as I fully expect, when the Keck 10-meter telescope goes into operation, new instruments produce totally new and unanticipated results. And I think the most exciting things that will come from this telescope are the things we can't even imagine today.
Dr. Pellerin, you've been involved with this project for 8 long years. What are your final thoughts on this night before we all hope that telescope goes up into space?
Well, Chris, I feel like people must have felt when they saw Columbus sailing off to discover new worlds. What this telescope does is takes man's intellect deep into the universe, and it's going to do great things for us, I think, in 3 areas. The science we've already talked about, the inspiration to our young people to go into technological fields, and in this time of what's going on in the world, I think this will be a very visible symbol of American courage and know-how, and I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Dr. Pellerin, gentlemen, thank you all very much for joining us tonight. ABC News will provide live coverage of tomorrow's liftoff of the Shuttle Discovery on Good Morning America if the shuttle is launched on schedule at 8:47 Eastern Time. And that's our report for tonight. I'm Chris Wallace in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.